What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we'll be going over object-oriented programming in Python. This is a very fun topic. It can also be pretty confusing when you're just learning about it, but stick with me. It's going to be a fun and interesting topic, and we're going to learn a lot, so let's get right into it. So what is object-oriented programming? Well, object-oriented programming, or OOP, is the idea of creating programs based on similar behaviors and attributes, and these behaviors and attributes are associated with objects. And so an object is just an instance of a class. We're going to get into this language very soon, so actually let's do that right now. Let's take it to the drawing board. So what is a class? Well, a class is just a blueprint of a system. So when we talk about a blueprint, let's imagine a house. So let's draw a house, a very badly drawn house. So this house is the blueprint for every house that we want to create. So we're an architect. We want every house to have this base and this roof, okay? Now, an object would be an instance of this house. So if I draw another house, it has the same base, except it may have different attributes or properties associated with it. So it may be a different color. It may be made in a different year. These are all properties or attributes that are associated with each unique instance of this class. So this is the house class, and each house that we build is unique in its own sense. Okay? So this is just classes and objects on an abstract level. We'll get to a more concrete example when we start programming. Okay, so you can see that each house has a different color, but they all come from this one house blueprint. Now let's actually get into programming. So to define a class, what we're going to do is we're going to use the class keyword, similar to defining a function. We'll just use the class keyword, and then we're going to follow it by the name of the class. Now, contrary to our naming conventions with variables and functions, we start class names with an uppercase. So we're actually going to create a student class. So we want the blueprint to be a student, and we're going to create student objects. So each student that we create will be an object, and each student will be unique. Imagine a school. A school has students, and every student is unique. Okay? So the name of the class is student, and then we're going to follow it with parentheses. Nothing in the parentheses for now. We'll get to that later. Then we follow it with a colon. That's the last part, just like a function. Now, every class that we create is going to have an initialization method or a constructor. This is implemented whether you type it or not, but we always want to type an initialization method because this is going to initialize our attributes as soon as we create an instance of this class. So what do I mean by this? Well, first off, we have to actually create the initialization method. This is nothing more than a function. A method is just a function inside of a class. It is the instance function, an instance method. So to create a initialization method, we're going to do the def keyword just like a function, and we're going to do something pretty funky. We're going to do double underscore init, double underscore. So this is just, don't worry about the double underscores for now. This is just short for initialization, and this is what we have to do when we create a class. And then this is also going to be new. We're going to use the self keyword. Self just refers to the instance of the class, this specific instance of the class. So each object we create, like I said, is going to be unique. Self is just referring to that instance of the class. So we're going to use the self keyword. You can name this anything. Naming convention is self. We like to use self. So you probably want to stick to self. Okay. Then next, just like a function, we're going to follow it with parameters. So let's say, but these are attributes that we want each student to have, that we know we want each student to have. So each parameter or each attribute is something that we know that the student will have. For example, each student will have a first name, each student will have a last name, and each student will be in a grade. Okay, so just like a function, we're passing these parameters, and these are unique to each student. And the reason why self is important here, because as I create an attribute right now, we're going to say that this instance of the class self dot first name is equal to first name. This may seem odd or confusing at first, but all we're doing here is we're creating an attribute, a property associated with this instance of the class or an object, and we're setting it equal to the argument passed when we create an instance of the class. So just think of it like a function. This is a parameter, and we're assigning the parameter's value to a variable, and this variable is just an attribute. Okay, and we're gonna do the same thing for last name. So self.last name equals last name, and self.grade equals grade. Now, these are all attributes. So now if we let's actually create an instance of this class. So hopefully this will make things less confusing. So we're going to create a variable called student1. This is going to be an object. Okay, student1 equals the name of the class, student, and then we have to, just like a function, we have to pass these as arguments. So these are the parameters. We have to pass arguments into this class because we're initializing the class, so, or the object. So first name, let's do John. Last name, let's do Doe. And say John is in 12th grade. Okay. And again, each object that we create is unique. So we can make a new object called, her name is Jane Doe, and Jane is in the 10th grade. Now, what do you think will happen if we print out these student variables or objects? Well, I made the mistake of calling them variables. These are objects. Student 1 and student 2 are objects. So it's actually going to print out something funky here, something that we can't really interpret. And it's going to say main.studentObject at this memory address. So that's not very readable because this is just an object in memory for now. But what we can do is we can access the attributes that we defined up here. So we can do student1 dot first name, and it's going to print the first name of student 1, John. We can do the same thing for student 2. You can print student 2 dot first name. It's going to print Jane. So we can access the attributes of each object using this dot operator and then the name of the attribute. So this can be very useful. We're going to create methods that will utilize these attributes. In fact, let's do that right now. So let's create a method. And remember, a method is just a function within a class. That's how I like to define method, but more specifically, a method is an action or behavior. So, for example, if we have a dog class, a dog can bark. Barking is an action. That is a behavior. A dog can walk. That is a behavior. A dog can run. That's a behavior. In this example, in this class, the student class, what do you think a behavior would be? Well, it may not be something physical like barking or running, but it can be something like calculating the grade. So we want to calculate the grade of the student. So right now we're modeling a real world system. We have a student and we want to calculate the grades of the student. But first we have to get the grades of the student. So let's actually create a new attribute called grades. And this is going to be an empty list. So this is just going to accumulate all of the students' individual grades. So now we're going to create a method. And like I said, it's just a function, except. So let's do add grade. So all we're doing is we're adding a grade. This is an action. And we're going to use this self keyword. Now, the reason we're using self here is because, again, we're accessing the specific instance of this class. We're accessing the self dot first name, self dot last name. We're accessing the attributes associated with this instance of the class. So to do that, to add a grade, all we're going to do is actually we want to input a number here. So we can't have parameters. So we're just going to do self.grades.append num. So the reason we're doing self.grades is because that we define self.grades up here, and we're saying that self.grades is the instance of this class. So self.grades.append num. We want to append a number to the grades of this student, not any other student, just this student. Okay? And so let's try it. Let's do student1.add_grade. Let's do 75. And let's do 75, 85, and then 95. And now what we can do is we can print student1.grades. Okay? It's going to print a list of all the grades. So now we created a method that adds a grade to the student's, let's say, gradebook or list of grades. Okay? Now we can do even more. We can calculate the average of the grades. Let's create another method that is called calc total grade. And again, we use self, and we don't need to pass a parameter. All we're doing is a calculation. And to get all the grades within, actually let's create an average variable. It's going to be equal to 0. And then we're going to use a for loop to loop through the grades list to get every value. So for grade in self.grades, we're going to add it to average. Okay? So what we're always doing is we have a variable called average. This is equal to 0 for now. And then for every grade in self.grades, we want to add this to the average. And of course, that's not the average, that's the total. So to actually get the average, we have to divide it by the total number of elements. So what we're going to return, we talked about return in our functions video, return average and then divided by the length of self.grades. So however many elements on self.grades. So right now we're saying that student 1 or John, they have 3 grades. So we're returning, we're adding all these together, and then we're returning the average of that. So this should be 85. So we're going to print student 1, and just like accessing a variable or attribute within a class, we're going to use the dot operator. So student 1 dot calc total grade, and we have to use parentheses for now because or else we'll get some funny output, just like what we saw here with the student object at this memory address. So now we're calculating the total grade, and it does print out 85. So 85 is the average grade. So now you can see we are creating a real system. We have a student. We can add a grade to the grade book. We can calculate the average grade. We can do a whole lot more. We can determine if the student is passing, is failing, has an A, B, C, whatever. We can do something. Actually, let's do something with this grade variable attribute. So we have this grade. We know what grade they're in. We can determine if they're in upperclassmen or not. So is upperclassmen self, and this is just gonna, let's just return true or false based on their grade. So return self.grade is greater than or equal to 11. So if this is true, if this expression is true, it's going to return true. If this is false, it's going to return false. So we're saying that if the student is in the 11th grade or above, then upperclassmen, and if not, they are not. So let's test this out. Print student 1 dot is upperclassmen, and let's do the same thing for student 2. So student 1 should be true and student 2 should be false, and that's exactly what occurs. So again, we can expand on this. In fact, we will expand on this in our next video, which will be talking about inheritance. But yeah, today we covered attributes, we covered classes, objects, methods. This is a basic example of a student class. We're able to add grades, we're able to calculate grades, and we can do more. But I hope that this wasn't too confusing. With the thing about object-oriented programming in classes, that you have to practice this. Try and create your own classes based on real objects, real systems. That's the only way that you're gonna get a better understanding of this. But if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something in this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video where we go over inheritance. Take it easy.